as I have dealt with some of my things, and God knows I'm not done yet, and as you have, and as you have pastored people, one of the feelings that can come when you start looking at the thing beneath the thing is, that's too horrible. I can't deal with it. The pain will take me out. I won't make it. And then, of course, well, could God really love me even with that? And it's just easier to keep driving over the pothole and not deal with the thing. What do you do with that anxiety and discomfort in looking at the thing? How's life working out for you? Do you find yourself doing what you want to do and not doing what you decide not to? And I'm not talking about, career or just the daily lifestyle things. I'm talking about the way you bring yourself to people and relationships, how your relationship with God is moving forward. I'm Dr. Carol, and in this episode, we're talking about why we do what we do. Human behavior is kind of complicated, but God created us in a certain way. There are ways things work in our human system. Just the way that we connect and don't connect and make decisions and don't make decisions and all of that. And what many followers of Jesus especially are discovering is that simply working on behaviors is usually not enough. Now, the culture at large is seeing that in so many ways, but the perspective of what Jesus is calling us to is a much deeper process than learning some propositional truths and trying harder for a certain list of behaviors. My guest in this program, I have been so looking forward to this conversation. SteveCarter is a pastor, an author, a speaker, a coach of communicators, a podcaster, and has been the pastor of one of the largest churches in the country in the past. And the message that he is currently sharing, The Thing Beneath the Thing, and his recent book by that name, really shines the light on why we do what we do and why so many of us struggle to do the things that we want to do. The thing beneath the thing, what's hidden inside and what God helps us do about it. My conversation with SteveCarter. SteveCarter, I've been looking forward to this conversation. First, just thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Carol. It is, it's truly an honor. Is it okay if I call you Dr. Carol? I didn't want to butcher your last name. How do I say your last name? Is it Tanksley?
Tanksley, but Dr. Carol is it, and is Steve okay?
Yes, Steve is okay. But I seriously, ever since you reached out and I started following what you are about, I'm like, man, where have you been all my life? Like
Wow.
The wisdom and like just how thoughtful you are. This is just an honor to spend some time with you.
Well, that means an awful lot to me. I want to start us off by something that for me was a number of years ago. I read the Bible since I could read and grew up in church. But I will always remember, I think it was sometime during my teen years, and I was getting stuck in this place where Paul is saying, why do I do what I don't want to do? And I know what I want to do, but I don't do it, and then I can't, and just all of that. And I remember feeling, God, why don't you tell me what to do? And I can fix this. And I remember not understanding at the time what was driving me and why I wasn't doing what I wanted to and why I kept doing stuff I didn't want to. And I don't think I'm alone there.
It's so true. I mean, you're quoting Romans 7:15, right? And yeah. Paul has two sentences. And the first sentence I've quoted to my wife, but it doesn't work. And it's just simply, I do not understand what I do. And so when I make a bonehead decision and my wife calls me on it, I'm like, babe, Paul said it. I'm saying it too. I do not understand what I do. And she's like, well, you better start learning to understand. But the second sentence, you're so right. It's so human. Like the good I want to do, I just don't do. But the thing I hate, I do. And whenever we react, we're just reenacting the past until we get to that turning point where we say, what's really going on? What's really underneath the surface?
Yeah. I can think of so many times more recently in my life when I have learned to ask that question and what a huge difference it makes. I want to give you opportunity to talk about the pothole analogy, just so we can all have a mental picture of that, because I think it just really puts in perspective what we need to unpack.
Yeah. So for any of you who don't live in the Midwest or the East Coast, I used to live in Chicago, and Chicago is one of my favorite cities on the planet. But Chicago has a pothole problem. I mean, there are potholes everywhere. And
Yeah.
what's amazing is if you hit a pothole, you and I got a flat tire once, you can dial a number 311 and report a pothole. And I ended up doing this. And if you've reported a pothole and the city of Chicago hasn't fixed it, they'll literally pay for your damages, which
Wow.
no wonder the city of Chicago's in a hard financial place, but that's another podcast. But I would say that what I came to realize in having this conversation with this city employee was that in the course of less than 100 days, January 1st, 2018 to March 21st, 2018, that the city of Chicago filled in 108,000 potholes.
Wow.
And like a pothole is created because water freezes, it expands, and the asphalt can't handle it, and so a crater is created. Well, the city employee walks up to it, sees it, adds some asphalt, and they move on to the next one. But sometimes they come up to a pothole and they realize this wasn't caused by inclement weather. There's actually something underneath the surface. And it might be that pothole might have been created by erosion, might have been caused by some pipe that is leaking, but something else underneath the surface is causing this. And until they deal with the thing beneath the thing, they're not going to just be able to fix it. And unfortunately, some potholes can become sinkholes. And this is literally what happened in the city of Chicago, where an entire street just gave way, and neighborhood block. And a 72-year-old man was driving and had like the ride of his life. He went down a couple stories. He ended up being okay. But the way that I think about it is from our past, from trauma, from wounds, from things that were said unto us, choices we made, things that happened or were done to us, we all have potholes. And if we don't have that courageous curiosity to learn about those potholes and what caused those potholes, they can become sinkholes that don't just affect us, but they affect those around us. And the collateral damage is real. And so for me, I really want to help people address the thing beneath the thing, but really address those potholes so that they don't become sinkholes.
Yeah. I think, as I see too much of the discipleship in the Christian church today, it's a list of behaviors and beliefs, but there is precious little in comparison of dealing with the thing beneath the thing. Steve, just from your position as a pastor and a writer and a speaker and a theologian, was Jesus really concerned about the thing beneath the thing? Let's just clear that up.
100%. I mean, he wanted to know what motivated people. He constantly said, the Pharisees are fixated by what it looks like on the outside. And again, that behavior modification, following the rules. But Jesus is like, I care what's going on the inside. Like, I want to make sure the inside's cleaned. Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything flows from it. And so the real journey into deeper formation, deeper discipleship, deeper way of Christ is learning what is going on inside, what's going on underneath the surface. And so I 100% agree with you that this isn't behavior modification.
Yeah.
This is about an excavation of the heart, the mind, the motivations of the soul, and beginning to become more aware of why we do what we do, and learning about how God's word instructs us to go about a better way of life.
Yeah, we could probably spend a whole podcast on this, but why do you think that so much of at least today's Western Christian church has missed this? Where did we get off track? Have you considered that at all?
Well, I think for many of us, we get praise by accomplishment and achievement.
Yeah.
Nobody ever just goes, hey, you went to counseling, well done. Like you're, like, hey, you're doing hard work, like, but we're kind of a culture, whether in medicine, that we go to the doctor once we're sick, but there's not preventative care that we often really take into account. And the same thing's true with the spiritual walk, is becoming more aware of why we do what we do sometimes slows us down just for a little bit, and but it actually is going to allow us to go farther in the long run. I think I've seen so many, pastors, I've seen so many marketplace leaders, I've seen so many well-intentioned good people. They came out of the chute and they were just creating and they were achieving, but their success was far outpacing their character.
Mm,
And time came up, and either they made a decision that wasn't healthy, or there was some form of abuse or some form of pastoral or leadership burnout, but
yeah.
they didn't finish the race. And I think for us, the more that we can begin to have the courage to address those potholes, we're preventing them from becoming sinkholes, and we're actually inviting more of God's goodness so that we can be more whole, holy, and spiritually healthy.
As you talk about that, it makes me think that that is the very reason why we're here. That God does not have us on this planet, first of all, to accomplish stuff. He has us here, first of all, to become. And that takes dealing with the thing beneath the thing. That the process that we are in the middle of is exactly the point.
It's so true, and I think part of that becoming is learning how to be with Christ
Yeah.
and sit with him. This is why the first church, they kept talking about it as being in Christ.
Yeah.
And Jesus, John 15, he keeps talking 10 times in 10 verses to remain or to abide. And abide comes from the word abode, which means to make your home in. And I think so often in our Western culture, we're like, keep the main thing the main thing. But Jesus kept preaching, keep the remain thing the main thing, learning to
Yeah.
remain and abide and be. And in that, you will become, in that, you will bear much fruit. But apart from being with, you can do nothing that will be sustainable over a long period of time. And
Yeah.
that's the, I think, the beauty of getting after the thing beneath the thing is you're trusting the gardener, you're trusting God's goodness, you're trusting God's grace to prune those areas that you probably needed to survive because of your childhood wounds, or you needed because it gave you something, but it's not going to take you where God wants to take you until you surrender and, in the most beautiful posture, open yourself up to his healing and wholeness, that it's available. It's available.
Wow. Encouraging, and it makes me think so much of it. So many of us get tied up in trying harder, but it doesn't work. Trying harder, just it not only is it not primarily the way of Jesus, but it doesn't end up working anyway. It's not that there's no effort, it's not that we sit back and just wait, but trying harder doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think that there's something maybe in a generation. And, I've been really, really fascinated because, this is the first time that I'm preaching to 5 generations, typically in a room. Typically, you had 3 generations or maybe 4 generations, but this time we've got from millennial and Gen Z all the way up to, the greatest generation ever, and the
Wow.
experiences from the trauma, the greatest generation, children of the depression,
Yes.
and then they go off to war. You just think of the PTSD, the trauma, language that they didn't even have back then. And then they have kids, and a lot of that greatest generation kind of escaped into alcoholism. You saw like the creation of AA, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you had boomers, and they were like, get me out of the house, I'm going to go build something of importance. And because they heard all these stories of, we don't have anything. My grandfather, he'd always say this, watch out for the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. And, I think a lot of boomers were like, I'm going to make dollars so I don't have to count pennies, and I think so every generation was a reaction and a response to the previous generation. They all had their unique cultural potholes. And so I think for me, learning to teach and speak and point people to what really, really matters is really, really important, to be aware of the journey that many of these people have been on that in some ways have, they were born into, and others decisions that they've made, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, we've referenced this more than once, and your book is The Thing Beneath the Thing, but talk about thing. How did you, unpack what we mean when we're saying thing? Because I think just that's really helpful.
Yeah, I had one of those bonehead moments where I just had I basically was on the verge of losing my mind. Someone had thrown a chunk of ice at my car. I was with my wife, my 9-month-old. We're in the middle of a snowstorm, and I flipped the car around. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Somebody threw something at us." And I find myself chasing who I think are like college age students, but I come to find out they're 6th graders, and I'm about ready to lay into them. And God just whispers to me at this moment when I'm standing at the front door, like, who's the crazy one? You left your wife and 9-month-old on the side of the road in a snowstorm, and you're chasing 6th graders.
Wow.
And I remember like thinking about this as I was walking back. And thanks be to God, I didn't say anything to those kids. I didn't lose my witness
Yep.
in that moment. But I remember thinking, wow, like we were on the verge of moving to California. I was leaving my grandparents' house when that chunk of ice hit my car. The people on the drive to my grandparents who were going to buy our house backed out. I was exhausted emotionally from saying goodbye to dear friends and family for the last like
Yeah.
week and a half. And all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my goodness, these kids gave me almost an escape. Like
Yeah.
they allowed me to channel all of my sadness and fears towards them. And I remember calling my mentor, and my mentor just said, laughing at me as I told him the story, and he just said, "Welcome to the thing beneath the thing, the endless discovery of what's going on." And so that phrase
Mm,
just stuck. And every time my wife and I would, get into a little like fight here or there, we'd just be like, well, okay, what's underneath that? What's the thing beneath the thing?
yeah.
What's really the matter? And then one day I was, just sitting in a room pastoring a couple from our church, and I realized as I asked them what really went on, and why did you say that and react that way? And this person just beautifully was honest and said, well, they triggered me. And I
Mhm.
said, well, what happened? And I realized, like, oh man, I make so many of my bonehead decisions when somebody gets close to one of my potholes. They drive over one of those potholes and it triggers me. So thing became this acronym as I started to kind of play with this over a few years. As I was sitting in pastoral meetings and meeting with people, I realized that there are 4 places that people tend to go when they get triggered. And the first one is hideouts.
Yeah.
And that is those metaphorical places we go to escape the pain of our stories. The second place is that most people go when they get triggered is to insecurity.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden they create these false stories about themselves, and they're replaying tapes of what somebody has said about them. And they just feel the shame storm. And sometimes they power down, but sometimes when they get triggered, they power up. And they feel like they've lost control of the family or the room or the crisis, the conversation, and they get verbally abusive. And so
Like
I
you
just
just about did with those 6th grade boys.
exactly, right. And all of a sudden I see people powering down or powering up. They are both a form of insecurity. And then, when people get triggered, we're seeing this on social media, we
Yeah.
see this on talk radio, is that it's easy when you get triggered to create narratives, false stories about others. And
Mhm.
so triggers, hideouts, insecurities, narratives, and then the G is the word grace. and
Mhm.
and I'm not referring to the kind of grace that I think for many of us, we came to learn in the church where, Christ died for us so that we can
Yeah.
receive this free gift and live in eternity with him. But I'm talking about what John Wesley, an old scholar and preacher, he believed that there were 3 stages of grace. And the third stage of grace is what he referred to as sanctifying grace. And it's that Spirit's power, this ongoing process to become more whole, holy, and spiritually healthy. And that's what I'm longing for. And Dr. Carol, you've probably seen Ruth Bell Graham, Billy Graham's wife's tombstone. And I love it because it just has her name, the date she was born, the date she passed. And then underneath it says, end of construction. Thanks for your patience. And I just think it's so beautiful because we are all in this process to become more whole, more holy, more spiritually healthy. And this is what God's grace wants to do. It's not just to get us out of hell and get us into heaven. It's about allowing eternity to start today and helping us become who he so desires us to be.
Mm. Beautiful paradigm. Um, Forgiveness is not enough, that grace has to do the rest. Or is it really good news? Would we really want to stay the way we were?
Right. And I think that's the problem sometimes that I think people have is they go, I said yes to Christ, but why is this problem still coming? There's a great musician and he writes some amazing lyrics, but he says, Jesus Christ, what did you do those 3 days that you were dead? Because this problem is going to last more than the weekend. And I think that's such a great line that so many of us struggle with, because the truth is we're all addicts. And some of us just have our addictions are more socially acceptable. I can be addicted to workaholism, or I could be addicted to food. And yet for many of us, the motivation might be the same as someone who's addicted to alcoholism or pornography or opioid use. They're still looking to something else to soothe and to comfort.
Yeah.
And it's in a matter of a moment of work or purchasing something or food or something else, it might give you a fleeting sense of peace, but it's not going to help you become a person of grace and peace. And that's where we allow ourselves to go through that sanctifying process that God does what God longs to do in each and every one of us.
If we have somebody, and I'm sure we do, who's listening, watching, and they see they're stuck, they have been hiding, they've been staying on the surface, what can somebody do to start this process or take another step in this process of spiritual transformation?
Yeah, great question. For me personally, I think the first thing that I always try to help people do is what triggers you.
Yeah.
Is if you just start with like, what triggers you, and then what's underneath that, because it's usually connected. If you can do some work there. Secondly, is where do you tend to go to hide out when someone gets close to those triggers? Where do you go, or what old tapes do you start to play, or what stories do you tend to tell about family members or other people who just get close to your potholes? So I typically say, hey, there's a little bit of homework to do. The second thing I say is there's freedom when you step into the light. And this, Christianity, a journey with Jesus isn't a solo sport. We need great guides, great mentors, great counselors. And so for me, when I'm getting into what triggered me and it's connected to past pain, I'm not skilled enough to know how to navigate my own story. I need help. And so part of that is through I go to counseling, and I have a great guide who's really helped me. So I always say, hey, that's something that can be really, really helpful. If there's friends that you can begin to bring this into the light. So a little homework, a little stepping into the light, and beginning that process to watch God do what he wants to do.
Yeah. Steve, you have been in some really high profile places. You are being fairly open and vulnerable. How did you learn to do that? Because there are plenty of people who don't. And it's refreshing. I can imagine if somebody had never heard your name and they were just listening and watching you right now, they would have no clue about the tens of thousands of people that have been impacted by you. But here you are. You and I are talking, and you're being vulnerable. How did you get there?
I mean, I think I got there through pain, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a sense of you realize the tendency is to pretend or to perform.
Yeah.
And or to achieve or to run to something else. And I think for many of us, we have the vernacular to talk about grace, but we're still motivated by shame. Or we have the ability and vocabulary to describe the kingdom of God, but we're really just living for the kingdom of me. And I think deep down, I knew I was far from good. I was created good. I was born into some brokenness. I made some broken decisions. I desperately needed what Christ had to offer.
Yeah.
And so I think as I started to realize the potential for good and the potential of myself, I realized, oh my goodness, like I don't want to repeat cycles. I
Mhm.
don't want legacies and patterns of brokenness. I want things to be stopped in me. And I think the only way I knew how to do that was to be honest and human. And
Yeah.
whenever I preach, I wear all black. It's not because so much of what I was born in Southern California was towards image management, how you
Mhm.
looked, what you
Yeah.
wear. But then I started to realize I care too much about what I wear. I care too much about how I look.
Mhm.
I'm spending more time on that than I am in prayer for our congregation or prep for our
Yeah.
preach. And I was reading at the same time a biography on Johnny Cash. And Johnny Cash, he wore all black, the man in
Mhm.
black, we know that, but
Yeah.
he said he wore that because he knew his own depravity.
Wow.
He knew his own brokenness. He understood the mercy and the grace that was showcased to him. And he never, just because he had a guitar and a mic and lights and opportunity in hand, to ever think he was better. And so for me, that really spoke to me to say, hey, just because I have a mic, just because I'm holding the Bible, like I better be preaching to myself.
Yeah.
I better be living what I'm speaking about. I better be going first in this, and not to make myself the hero, not to center myself, but to literally center the one who came, the one who exemplified what grace and peace and freedom is all about. And if it's that good, and like you said, good news, it needs to be good news first and foremost for me. And
Yeah.
it has been. And so that's kind of a long way of getting at it, but
Love it.
I want to be honest with my potholes,
Yep.
and honest with the places that I'm in process, to help encourage people to go on this journey, to
Yes.
to learn from amazing voices like you, to sit with amazing wise counselors and formation directors, like people who can literally
Mhm.
help shape you and form you and talk about the thing beneath the thing.
Mm. As I have dealt with some of my things, and God knows I'm not done yet. And as you have, and as you have pastored people, um, one of the feelings that can come when you start looking at the thing beneath the thing is that's too horrible. I can't deal with it. The pain will take me out. I won't make it. And then of course, well, could God really love me even with that? And it's just easier to keep driving over the pothole and not deal with the thing. What do you do with that anxiety and discomfort in looking at the thing?
Well, I think it's a really natural response. And so
Yeah.
if any of you who are watching this, listening to this, can really relate to that, I would just say me too. The only thing that I would just kind of play with just for a moment is, how's life working for you
Yes.
when this sense is still being having to be managed under the surface? Like
Yes.
you might use words like freedom, but how free are you really? And there's a
Yes.
great story in the 1830s, a man by the name of George Wilson, he and another guy, they robbed a U.S. mail carrier, postal service worker, and they actually killed him. They stole the mail, and at that time, that led to a death sentence. But George Wilson had some friends in high places, and the friends reached out to President Andrew Jackson and asked for a presidential pardon. They said, "Hey, this is not who George Wilson is. Like, please." And President Andrew Jackson said, "Okay, I trust you. I'll give him a presidential pardon." Wilson's in prison. His buddy who was with him had already been executed,
Wow.
and they give him a presidential pardon. And Wilson says, I can't go.
Wow.
So then all of a sudden, the police and the people who are like at this prison don't know what to do. So it goes to the US Supreme Court, because the question was, can a person deny a presidential pardon? The
Wow.
US Supreme Court says they can. They can. We can't force someone to step into freedom. And that for me is exactly the heart of the gospel. That
Yeah.
many of us, we've been saved, but we're still living in prison. Or we use the language that we are free, but like we don't actually believe it for ourselves. I believe it for this person. I believe it for that person.
Yeah.
I just don't actually think that I can be freed from my past and actually freed to a new
Yes.
life. And so that for me is, hey, if you feel so stuck in the past, well, in many ways, then what you're saying is Jesus couldn't have died for that.
Hmm.
And resurrection isn't possible for that. And I would say I hear you, but I just choose to disagree. What the beauty of the gift of the gospel and the good news is, none of us deserved it. None of us can earn this. All we can do is receive it, and little by little, day by day, begin to believe it and apply it and be with this great grace giver, and watch what he does in and through us. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Sometimes it gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, the more you step into it, the more you will bring freedom to your body, to your mind, to your relationships, to your past, to the present, and to the future.
Mm. Thank you for that, Steve. That does something in my soul.
Mm.
May none of us refuse the pardon
Yes.
that's offered. Yeah. You've been through some heavy stuff in the last couple of years. What are you learning about yourself in
Yeah.
this season?
Yeah. So I kind of stepped out of a role. It was my dream job, and some allegations had come about someone, my mentor, and I just saw how people were handling it, and just felt like, man, this is something that I think needed to be done differently. And so I stepped away,
Yeah.
and it was so much of 20 years of what I had been working towards and for. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night one night, and I felt like God say, go to the desert and wait for instructions. And it just felt like this impression upon my heart. And I got up and I started journaling, and I felt like, just as I journaled, I wrote these words: you can't achieve your way out of this. You can only grieve your way through it.
Mm.
And Dr. Carol, I just feel like for me, I had very strong muscles of achievement.
Yes.
I had goals, and I would work hard for those goals. My life was up and to the right. Everything had gone, for the most part, career-wise, the way I had wanted it and dreamed it up to go. And it was built on hard work and gifting and talent and opportunity, some that I didn't deserve, but God opened doors and people trusted me. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see something coming,
Yeah.
and it knocked me out. And so
Yeah.
what I wanted to do was play to the old playbook, which was, well, just go find somewhere that you can achieve. And I felt like God was saying, no, 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 no. You might be in your 40s or 50s when it comes to achievement, but you're a toddler when it comes to sitting in your disappointment and your
Wow.
sadness.
Wow.
And so the next morning, my wife woke up, and I told her what I had felt like I'd heard, and she teared up and said, I've been sensing the same thing. I want to go home. And she lives in Arizona. And so then I was like, oh no, the desert's literal. We're moving to the desert. And so I've just been learning about this kind of in between time. It's been
Yeah.
character school. It has been a refining time. It's been a time where I've realized I had some amazing things that I needed to learn about God, relearn about God, and, truth be told, unlearn about God, so that I could, prepare myself for what he has in store for me next. And so this has been a couple years of just really focusing, opening up, getting after the thing beneath the thing, trying to discover those potholes, and really invite God's grace so they don't become sinkholes, but that I can become more whole, holy, spiritually healthy, and prepared for what he has in store next.
I know he has a lot. Just listening to you be as open as you have about this journey encourages all of us in dealing with our potholes.
Yeah.
I want to kind of circle back and end around grace. We've touched it a couple times, but in the book, The Thing Beneath the Thing, you say, grace will find you and grace will find you out. Both so beautiful. Unpack that a bit.
Yep. So, I always believe that grace found me. I remember, like, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And so to have two juniors in high school, I was a seventh grader. Their names were Dominic and Nathan, but they went by the name Dominate, which is just so awesome. And I'll never forget, as a, this junior Dominic came up to me and said, Carter, do you want to learn how to dominate life? And he and Nathan just started to disciple me, and they taught me about grace and taught me about Christ and God sending his son to get closer and closer. And I said, yes, got baptized a few months later, and I wanted what they had. But what I didn't know is how relentless grace is. And, I think if we look at, a number of years ago, Tiger Woods, and, when he went through an accident, and all of a sudden reports started to come out about affairs and addictions and patterns of brokenness. And truth be told, like, I think we were all a little bit surprised by this. And I remember someone just going, man, he got caught. And I realized, I was like, no, actually, this is an invitation for the healthiest opportunity. Like, grace found him. Like, he'd been able to manage a lot of these secrets, and grace now just found him out. That's actually grace. When I get pulled over for speeding, grace found me out. Like, I was speeding. And I think what's so hard is, oftentimes in the Christian life, we can say, I was wrong and I need Christ. And then we say yes to Christ and we begin a relationship, but we struggle to keep saying that there's areas in our life that are wrong. And God's so kind, and God's so gracious, and God's so good that he doesn't want you to live a life of mediocrity, a life of managing, a life of hiding. He wants you to live a life that's whole and holy. And his goodness is going to help bring that to the surface. So grace is going to find you. Yes. But grace is also going to find you out. And I think for me, great leaders, great followers of Christ, great humans, they actually say, I need help here. I need help here. The founders of the Salvation Army, William Booth, has this great line: the greatness of a person's power is their measure of surrender. And I think if you can just surrender and say, hey, here's it, or, the first 3 steps to AA, basically could be kind of summarized, as John Ortberg would say, I can't, Christ can, I think I'll let him. I can't beat this pothole, but Christ can. I think I'll let him. I can't beat this trauma, but Christ can, with good help and good wisdom. I think I'll let him, and I think the more that we can live like that, the more honest, the more human, the more accessible, the more real, but the more dependent we will be on the goodness of grace and not on our own merits.
Thank you, Steve. Just give people an opportunity to, mention your book, and how can they keep up with you?
Yeah, thank you. Well, if you're on social media, you could find me Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Steve Ryan Carter. You can go to thethingbeneaththething.com. The book is sold to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Hudson. It's sold everywhere. And then you can find more information on me, some of my teachings, at SteveCarter.org.
And we'll make sure all the links are in the show notes to the podcast and under this video. I'm almost a little bit speechless, Steve. This has been just a beautiful picture and journey. God bless you in your ongoing dealing with the thing. I know I need to continue to deal with my thing, and may we all in the body of Christ, do this, such a more whole, more healthy, more mature way of approaching our walk with God. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll, for the time, and please continue to keep leading the way in so many of these brave conversations. And it's been fun just to get to know you more and see about your work, and just more blessing and favor upon you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Grace will find you, and grace will find you out. Let him, as Steve was saying, coming to the place where we say, I can't, Christ can. I think I'll let him. I'll let him do his thing. I pray that you are doing that. I pray that you have the courage to be curious about the thing beneath your thing, about dealing with what's under the surface, and let Christ shine his light there to connect with others. You'll notice in our conversation, Steve mentioned more than once about how important it is that we shine the light on this stuff and connect with others rather than hiding how easy it is for us to hide. I pray that you make that courageous decision to walk this journey, and if you already are, that you keep going. Check the links under this video to Steve's book, The Thing Beneath the Thing, what's hidden inside and what God helps us do about it. You'll also find the links to Steve's website and social media and so on. Really, it's some important thoughts and conversations that make all the difference in the world about your spiritual transformation. I want to invite you to leave me a message. You can certainly leave a message under this video. If you want to leave a confidential message just to me, you can use the contact page on our website. You'll find that link there as well. And that message comes to me, and I respond personally. I would love to hear from you. If this has triggered some things in you, and pun intended, if this has triggered some thoughts, opened some doors to what may be your thing beneath the thing, write to me. I love hearing from you. I love helping people work through many of those challenges, so take advantage of that. Thank you for sharing this time with me, and until next time, may God bless you.